In 1976, construction workers digging a drainage canal in Butuan city uncovered something extraordinary. Wooden boats. Not small fishing vessels, but massive Balangay ships dating back to 320 AD. That's over 1,700 years ago. Nearly 1,000 years before Manila even existed as a settlement. And that discovery should have transformed how Philippine history is taught. Because those boats proved something most Filipinos were never clearly told. While Luzon was still developing small settlements, Butuan was already building ocean-going ships and trading internationally. Yet open a modern Philippine textbook, and Butuan's 1,000-year maritime civilization is often summarized in a paragraph or two. Why? Let's look at the evidence. Between 320 AD and 1250 AD, Butuan was not just a settlement. It was a major maritime center. The Balangay boats were up to 15 meters long, built from hardwood planks, edge-joined without nails, lashed with fiber ropes, sealed with tree resin. Carbon dating confirms these vessels were constructed across nearly a millennium. That means shipbuilding in Butuan wasn't an experiment. It was a sustained tradition. Now compare that timeline to Manila. The earliest archaeological evidence of settlement in Manila dates to around 900 AD. By then, Butuan had already been building ships for nearly 6 centuries. That chronological detail alone reshapes the narrative. In 2009, the National Museum reconstructed a balangay using traditional methods. No modern tools. They sailed it from Butuan to Manila, then across open sea toward China. It survived storms. It handled long-distance navigation, which means ancient Butuan sailors likely made those voyages regularly. Not symbolically, not once, but systematically. This was organized international trade. Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Archaeological excavations revealed more than boats. Burial sites across Butuan contained Chinese ceramics from the Tang and Song dynasties. Gold death masks, gold sashes, bracelets, rings, glass beads traced to India, iron tools. These were elite burials. The grave goods weren't decorative. They were indicators of status, wealth, and international connection. This wasn't isolation. It was participation in a regional trade network spanning Southeast Asia and beyond. Then came one of the most significant discoveries, an ivory seal carved with ancient script, combining Old Javanese and Sanskrit, dated to around 900 AD. That seal suggests literacy, administration, record-keeping, structured governance, long before Spanish colonization, which challenges the colonial narrative that civilization and writing arrived only with Europe. Chinese historical records from the Song Dynasty mention a place called Butuan. In 1001 AD, envoys from Butuan arrived at the Chinese imperial court. This is documented in Chinese annals. That means Butuan engaged in diplomatic exchange. Not myth, not legend, recorded history. So why does this often receive limited emphasis in national textbooks? Here's where the proportion problem becomes clear. I went through a current Araling Panlipunan textbook used in Philippine schools. I counted the pages. Manila and Luzon pre-colonial history, 47 pages. Butuan and Mindanao pre-colonial history, 3 pages. 3 pages to cover a 1,000-year maritime civilization. That's not balanced education. That's erasure through proportion. And every time a student reads that textbook, they learn that some regions matter more than others. Part of the answer lies in historical centralization. When the Spanish established their colonial capital in Manila, administrative and written records centered there. Later American institutions reinforced that structure. Post-independence education systems inherited those frameworks. Over time, narratives became Luzon-centered, not necessarily out of malice, but through institutional continuity. And once a narrative solidifies, it becomes difficult to restructure. This isn't about Luzon versus Mindanao, it's about proportion. A maritime civilization that lasted over 1,000 years deserves more than a footnote. Because history shapes identity, and identity shapes how regions see themselves. For Mindanaoans, this isn't abstract. Every textbook that minimizes Butuan tells a child their heritage matters less. That's not education. That's erasure through proportion. And it affects how young people see their own region's significance. The Balangay Boats are real. The gold artifacts are real. The Ivory Seal is real. The Chinese records are real. They exist in museums, in archives, in peer-reviewed research. The evidence is established. The question is simply whether our national narrative reflects its full significance. Philippine civilization did not begin in one city. It emerged across islands, river systems, and maritime corridors. Butuan was one of its earliest major centers. Recognizing that doesn't diminish Manila. It enriches the entire story, and perhaps it's time that story is told in full. Now let's talk about something practical. Bring Butuan's artifacts home. Build a world-class museum in Butuan. Not a small provincial exhibit, but a major institution. Display the Balangay boats where they were built. Display the gold where it was crafted. Let tourists travel to Mindanao to see one of Southeast Asia's oldest maritime civilizations. That isn't just historical justice. That's economic development. That's regional empowerment. That's national balance. Right now, the most significant Butuan artifacts are housed in Manila, in the National Museum, over 1,000 kilometers from where they were created. The people of Butuan, whose ancestors built these ships and crafted this gold, have to travel to Manila to see their own heritage. This follows the same logic that keeps Egyptian artifacts in British museums. Better facilities, better security, more visitors. But that's circular reasoning. Invest in Butuan's museums and they'll have better facilities. Display the artifacts in Butuan and more people will visit. The real reason they remain in Manila is institutional inertia, and that needs to change. Because this story isn't just about Butuan. It's about how Philippine history has often been told from one geographic center and how that shapes what we value. Cebu has its story. The Visayas have their own achievements. Mindanao has deep, complex civilizations. Even regions outside Metro Manila in Luzon have been sidelined. The issue isn't competition between regions, it's centralization. When one perspective dominates, others fade into footnotes, and footnotes shape identity. If you're from Mindanao, know this: your ancestors were not peripheral. They were maritime navigators. They were traders connecting Southeast Asia. They were artisans working gold with international influence. That legacy is yours, and it deserves proper recognition in how Philippine history is taught. If you're from Luzon or anywhere else in the Philippines, this isn't an attack. It's an expansion. Your education may have been incomplete, not because teachers lied, but because history is often simplified. The full Philippine story is bigger than Manila, and that should make us proud. Now let's be clear about the evidence. 9 Balangay boats, carbon dated between 320 AD and 1250 AD. Gold artifacts with Sanskrit inscriptions showing Indian influence. Chinese ceramics from the Song Dynasty. An ivory seal dated around 900 AD, proving literacy and administration. And Chinese records documenting diplomatic missions from Butuan in 1001 AD. That is not myth. That is archaeology. That is documented history. And it proves that Butuan had a golden age that lasted over 1,000 years. Spanish colonial trade policy shifted commerce to Manila. When that happened, Butuan's role declined. not because it lacked sophistication, but because global trade routes were redirected. The Spanish wanted monopoly control. They forced all international commerce to flow through their capital. And Butuan, which had connected the Philippines to China and India for over a millennium, was cut off. That shift shaped the historical narrative that followed. And narratives matter, because history shapes identity, and identity shapes development. Let me put this in chronological perspective. In 320 AD, when Butuan was building its first documented Balangay boats, the Roman Empire was beginning its decline in Europe. In 900 AD, when Butuan's ivory seal was being used to mark official documents, most of Europe was in what historians call the Dark Ages. Literacy was rare, international trade networks were limited. Meanwhile, Butuan was engaging in systematic commerce with China and India. This wasn't primitive, this was sophisticated, and it happened centuries before European colonizers arrived, claiming to bring civilization. The archaeological evidence tells us something else important. Butuan wasn't an isolated anomaly. It was part of a wider network of Indianized kingdoms across Southeast Asia. Places like Srivijaya in Sumatra, Champa in Vietnam, the Khmer Empire in Cambodia. These were Hindu-Buddhist civilizations with advanced governance, art, architecture, and international trade. Butuan was connected to this world. The ivory seal proves it. The Indian gold proves it. The Chinese ceramics prove it. Butuan was part of a cosmopolitan Southeast Asian civilization that predated European contact by centuries. And this matters for how we understand Philippine identity. The colonial narrative often presents pre-colonial Philippines as scattered, primitive, waiting for Europe to bring order and progress. But the evidence from Butuan contradicts that entirely. Pre-colonial Philippines had structure, it had international connections, it had literacy, it had wealth, it had art. These weren't gifts from colonizers, they were achievements of Filipino ancestors, and acknowledging that doesn't diminish the complexity of colonial history, it just makes it accurate. Here's what needs to happen moving forward. The Department of Education should commission a comprehensive review of how pre-colonial Philippine history is taught, not to replace one regional bias with another, but to ensure proportion. If Butuan's maritime civilization lasted 1,000 years and connected the Philippines to international trade networks, that deserves substantial curriculum space, not 3 pages, an entire chapter, with maps showing trade routes, with images of the Balangay boats, with discussion of the ivory seal and what it represents. Students should understand that Philippine civilization was multi-centered, that innovation and development happened in many places, and that recognizing this strengthens national identity rather than weakening it. Teachers also have a role. Even before official curriculum changes, educators can supplement their lessons. Show students pictures of the Balangay boats. Explain the significance of the archaeological findings. Use Butuan as a case study for how historical narratives can become unbalanced. Encourage critical thinking about sources. Why are some regions emphasized and others minimized? What does that tell us about who writes history? These are important questions, and they make students better thinkers. And for anyone who visits Manila and goes to the National Museum, when you see the Butuan collection, understand what you're looking at. These aren't just old boats and artifacts. These are evidence of a civilization that thrived for over 1,000 years. A civilization that built ships capable of crossing open ocean, that traded with empires, that had writing and governance and art. And that civilization was Filipino. It was Mindanaoan, and it was here long before Manila existed. Here's the broader principle. Philippine history is not a single story. It's many stories that intersect. Manila's rise as a colonial and post-colonial capital is one story. Butuan's millennium as a maritime trading center is another. Cebu's role in early Spanish contact is another. The Moro Sultanate's resistance to colonization is another. Each story is important, and each story deserves proportional space in how we educate the next generation. For students researching this topic, here are the key sources. The National Museum's publications on the Butuan Balangay Boats include detailed carbon dating and construction analysis. The Ivory Seal has been studied extensively by epigraphers with published analyses of the script.